Welcome to the 2% Scaling Strategies for Women Entrepreneurs who are on a mission to scale and succeed to seven figures and beyond. I am your host, Eleanor Beaton. I am the CEO of a seven-figure business, and we help women entrepreneurs nail their message, niche, and market position so they can think, strategize, and get paid like a seven-figure CEO. So today on the 2%, we are continuing a series of conversations with extraordinary women entrepreneurs like my guest today, where we explore things like the realities of running multiple six and seven-figure businesses. We take you behind the scenes of what's working now for real women entrepreneurs who are out in the field, creating value, bringing it to the marketplace very successfully. We share inspiring stories from amazing women leaders. And this is all in the name of inspiring you to take your business to the next level. I am so excited to introduce our guest today. Deb Boulanger is one of our powerhouse clients. She is the host of the Life After Corporate podcast and the founder of the Launch Lab for Women Entrepreneurs. She helps smart, accomplished women leaders make the leap from corporate America and, for my Canadian friends, corporate Canada, to entrepreneurship. So over the last 20 years, Deb has launched literally dozens of services that have generated hundreds of millions in revenue for her clients. And she even launched and grew a single division from 0 to 32 million in 30 months. She's taught and advised hundreds of new and aspiring women entrepreneurs to use these same launching strategies to test their business ideas and validate their money-making model. Deb Boulanger, welcome to the 2%.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. You know, this just thrills me, right? So I adore you. I adore being in the incubator, and I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I am so excited. Like in the green room, we were sort of hashing out what of the million things we could talk about that we really wanted to share with you all today. And I think one of the things that that comes up a lot for me, that I see a lot, and I know you see this, Deb, as well, is this trend. And it seems to be a trend that's accelerating year over year of brilliant women leaving corporate careers at the height of their earning power, at the height of their careers, to sort of step away from these amazing careers that they've had and loved and excelled at to launch businesses. So this is a fascinating phenomenon. And I thought we could start by digging in, because I bet there are women listening to this who are either in that position right now, they're thinking about making the leap, or they have recently, right? Why do you think that happens? Like, why would somebody walk away from a multiple six-figure paycheck, in some cases, to start their own thing? What's going on with them?
Well, I think it's multiple reasons. First of all, it could be burnout. For me, that was part of my story. It also happens that there's something that you become really passionate about. There's a problem you want to solve, that you've got the skills and you want to apply, and you're attracted by the freedom and flexibility. I know so many of my clients who are mothers who have children that are younger than high school age just want that flexibility to have more time with their children before they're out of the house, before they're gone. So I think it's a combination of burnout, having a passion for something, wanting that freedom, wanting that flexibility. And then, let's call it out. It's also a sidestep to the proverbial glass ceiling. There is no glass ceiling when you're an entrepreneur. There's no limit to what you can earn. This is your ticket to the C-suite. You are the CEO, and all the glory and pressure that goes along with that. So that's what I think.
Yeah. And, and you've talked about it as sort of the new feminist movement for that very reason, that when you do have your own business, you have both the responsibility, the joy, and the freedom of calling the shots, of deciding where it is that you're going to go. But it's so interesting. I can remember having on the podcast a woman named Maureen Murdoch, and she is the creator of what we now know of as the heroine's journey. And so she did a lot of work, I think, in the 1970s and 80s with very successful corporate women leaders. And she had been really inspired by the work of Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, where the hero goes out in search of, what he wants. He encounters obstacle and overcomes that obstacle, and then he ultimately gets what he wants. With women, what she was finding is that they were getting to that place, they were getting to that level, and kind of looking around and being like, is this it? I'm not sure
Yeah.
what I want, right?
Yeah. And what's next? I think that was part of my story as well. This was my biggest dream, to achieve this level of success. And I'm here, and it's like, okay, so what? So I'm never at a parent teacher conference. I never see my son at his ball games. There was a lot of stuff happening in my personal life at the same time. My mother's health was declining. So I just had so little time and so little resources. The other thing I hear from a lot of women is, I'm tired of promoting someone else's mission and someone else's vision. If I'm going to work this hard, I'm going to work on my own mission and my own vision.
Yeah, exactly. That desire to produce something meaningful according to you.
And make
what I mean?
impact,
How you
you
define it.
know?
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, because I think, that idea, what I have found is that for so many women entrepreneurs, impact is as potent a currency as money. They want to make millions, and we want to impact millions. It's a both and situation.
Yeah, because when women are successful, women give back to the economy. They give to causes that they care about. So there's this circulation of money in the women's economy, and that becomes a powerful force. I think an even more powerful force as women get to that 2% club of making millions of dollars, making seven figures, because we're in control of where that money goes.
100%. And there's no greater
Yeah.
feeling. You know what I mean? And I think that's why. And it's interesting because I will have conversations with people from time to time. You all know who you are out there who may be listening. And it's so interesting. So especially let's say they have left a really high pressure job, where they were very successful, pulling down great salaries. And so again, as we've talked about, it's not enough. They want more. They want something different. So they go and create something different. But the first thing is, you know what? I'm just going to keep my expectations low. I'm going for $100,000 in revenue. And I know that for some of you, you're not there yet, and that's totally okay. But for them, they're like, look, I was making 200 in my career. I'm going to make 100K in my business, and I just don't want the pressure. And one of the things that I will say sometimes is, you know what? I remember I had more pressure making 100,000 than making 1,000,000, just in terms of it's all on you at that point. So think big, ladies, because you can really, there's like a lot more freedom, when you have that structure and support. So speaking of structure and support, these women who are watching right now, or, and are really thinking about making that leap, or they recently have, and they're in that sort of startup phase. Let's talk about some of the most important things that we think they should know.
Yeah.
When it comes to making the leap, like what would be one of the main things? Like if you could share, look, if you can get clear on this, or if you can nail this, it's going to be so helpful for you.
Yeah, so there are really three key things. One is get really clear on the problem you solve. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
And if there's not a defined problem that someone thinks is a problem that they're willing to pay to have go away and get their desired result, then you don't have a business.
Yeah.
So it's like finding that problem, finding that gap in the market. You and I both talk about the gap.
Yeah.
And then it's creating a solution that people want to buy, and packaging and pricing that in a way that's an easy yes for your clients to come on board.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part. So I think there's a lot of wishful thinking strategy that happens when women first make the leap, whether you're thinking that, oh, I'll just settle for 100,000. A lot of the women I talk to want to replace the paycheck they left behind.
Yep.
Without burning through their savings and without being homeless. So there's a lot of fear too around making the leap. And there's some unrealistic goals of doing that in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And while they're really skilled at what they do, they've never launched a business before.
Yeah.
And so that's when that broke my heart, because there was so much energy out there, so many women wanting to make an impact through their work, but they just didn't know how.
Well, and I think it gets back to this idea that it's easy to overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years or 10 years, and that is huge. And it's interesting. There's so much stuff that I want to chat about based on what you just said. So first, this notion of burning through your savings and investing in business. I'd love to get into that a little bit, because I think
Mhm.
that's a really powerful conversation, but also this mindset. So one of the things that I think about and that I have seen from entrepreneurs when you're sort of making the leap from corporate to entrepreneurship, there's a mindset shift that happens, and that was certainly my experience, where you basically, and the best way I can describe it, I remember years ago, I'm sitting at a boardroom table and I'm sitting beside this really experienced banker who did a lot of work with startups and new businesses. And he turned to me and he said, businesses and entrepreneurs, they eat what they kill. So what he was saying is there's intensity. So you don't have, and I would argue that entrepreneurs are less secure than people working inside, or organizations. Sure, you don't get your paycheck necessarily in the same way every 2 weeks, but there is this mindset shift that you are bringing. There is an intensity there of how we operate. There is a sense of urgency with which we must accomplish specific things. There is a real need to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone to do the things required to generate the revenue we want to generate. And we have to balance all this with being patient with ourselves. And
Yeah.
how has that journey been for you? Like doing those
Well,
things, you know?
if you listen to the Life After Corporate podcast, a lot of it is about my journey. And one of the episodes I recorded was how not to be your worst boss ever.
Right?
Because
True.
whatever habits that you have, and on Strength Finders, one of my strengths is achiever.
Yep.
And that's more of an
Same.
affliction than a strength, because then you're always like setting yourself up for higher and higher goals and doing more and more and more. So there are a couple of things, whatever you felt in the corporate world will be amplified in spades as you go out on your own. And one of those secret kind of insidious things is I'm not worthy. So I think this trips women up in the corporate world. There have been many studies by Bain, McKinsey, that women don't go for promotions. Women don't ask for as much money when they do get promoted. And that will really trip you up when you make the leap, because when it comes to charging for your services, packaging and pricing and having sales conversations, women will at first default and give things away for free
Yeah.
because they're not comfortable getting paid, or they will undercharge. They'll charge by the hour. And that's one that really drives me crazy, because
Stop
if you're
charging by the
charging,
hour, people.
stop that.
Right
If you
now.
charge by the hour, you will run out of time and you will never hit your income goal. So, it's some of these things that you and I talk about all the time, that I teach in the Launch Lab and that you also teach in the incubator, is that it'll kick up all your stuff.
Yeah.
And so the mindset work you have to do is on your own value and on your own self-worth, and your value and what you're providing when you're solving a real problem and you're filling that gap and you're getting people to a place that they desire to be and they can't get there on their own. There's an intrinsic value to that. And, if you're pricing your services based on the value you're delivering to someone else, that's a complete mindset shift.
It's a total mindset shift. And it's so interesting because it's the thing that, you can learn pricing strategies, so we're saying right now, people, you need to stop charging by the hour. That's not an effective practice. That's actually putting your business at risk. It's putting your business actually at risk, because your profit margins are not going to be high enough to give you the kind of cash reserves that you need to continue growing, all of this stuff. And we might even lay out exactly how to price. But if you haven't done the internal work, around this, you're not going to charge it. I can remember, I don't know if you experience this, but I remember back when I first started coaching, and I had a coaching package, and it was like, I put it together, and I can't remember how much it was, like $3,000 or something like that. So
Yeah.
I have the conversation with the person, she wants to work with me. I have the conversation with her. And then, and I was still early, so I was still a little uncomfortable doing my sales conversations. I do my sales conversation. I'm like, it's $3,000. And I am feeling incredibly nervous, second guessing myself. Is this too much? She's going to laugh me out of the house. Like all of those things, guys, we all feel this, right? We've all gone through it. And she's like, that's it? In that moment, I wished I had like tripled my price, but I thanked her, inside I was thanking her so much for letting me know. Like it's so, doing this work is so huge.
Yeah, because it's not about you. And this is true for marketing as well. It's the value that's in the eyes of your ideal client who wants what you have to offer. And we get all messed up and tripped up when you start making decisions for someone else on what they can afford. And this is really important right now because people are saying, should I be selling in these challenging times? Can people afford it? And so it's the self-worth equation. It's the thing. It's that you're making decisions, excuse me, and you're thinking about what other people can afford and what they can do. And, that's all the stuff that trips you up. And that's the stuff that actually delays you from making money.
And this gets back to the eat what you kill, and this gets back to one of the things that we were kind of talking about in the green room was this idea of what are some of the essential skills that we need as women entrepreneurs, especially as we're getting started, especially understand, especially when you sell something intangible, and most services are intangible, these things become so much more important, and it really comes down to marketing and positioning and sales, but doing that for yourself. So there's the internal work of not making it about us, and there's the very tactical and practical work, which is about, are you clear about the problem you solve? Do you stand for something very specific in the marketplace? Are you using your business as a personal development tool, which can completely happen? Or is it an actual business that happens to provide incredible personal development opportunities for the leader? I mean, how much have you grown as a woman and a leader since
Oh my God.
right?
I mean, when I first got started, I was afraid to speak in public. I mean, this would be causing me heart palpitations right now.
I know
And
you have like a successful podcast. You speak all over the place. You do like virtually,
it's my most favorite thing right now.
Yeah.
It's my most favorite thing. And I think part of that is also the self-confidence piece. So the self-esteem piece is I'm not worthy. The self-confidence piece is, oh, I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes very helpful to have a coach who can show you the ropes, and you go out there and it feels, I know for my clients in the Launch Lab, the first time they do a webinar or the first time they do a Facebook Live, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when you've done the foundational work, which is what this conversation is all about, doing the foundational work, and you can speak, which your ideal client is thinking, which you are brilliant at, then it makes all the difference. You've got this immediate visceral connection, and they're tuned into your signal. So there's, when you say you eat what you kill, there's two ways to go about it. There's, and what a lot of people do is go after leads. And that's a very pushy kind of way of selling. When you're drawing and attracting your ideal clients to you through magnetic marketing, you're using your voice, you're being seen and heard, you're doing things like LinkedIn Lives and Facebook Lives, you're doing webinars, you're speaking from the stage so that you can have your messages heard, doing podcasts. That's a great top of funnel activity. So getting clear on the problem you solve, the gap you fill, your mission, your value, and then creating a platform for your message is super important. And it's a crowded market. And so that's why you need to have a differentiated strategy. You need to have an identified ideal client and be able to stand out
Yeah.
as a big fish in a small pond, right?
Well, and it's and absolutely, and it's this idea of constraint, and I think that's probably one of the biggest switches that I see people have to make.
Yeah.
You go from being maybe more conceptual, broader in your thinking. You have a lot of lateral vision sometimes inside an organization. You come in to be an entrepreneur, and everybody has heard the expressions, then the riches are in the niches, and it is true, and constraint is this gorgeous, orderly force structure that we impose, lovingly on business that really accelerates the movement of money, and to your point, how does that happen? Well, it happens when we're very clear on, you call it ideal client, I call it most valuable buyer. Right. So who's the person that, who is this client or organization or, person inside an organization who is going to love what you do, and not just be the person who comments on social media about it, but the person who buys, and have you built your business around that person? Are you, like you talked about, that strong signal? Is it so clear? Are you speaking so clearly? And it's interesting because these skills that we're talking about, most of us have the roots of them, so we're talking about things like communication, right? That's mostly what we're talking about here. And so we think, we've been super successful, in our roles. We think, well, I know how to communicate. And I think that's where sometimes the forgiveness comes in, and the patience, because we're learning how to use these skills in a totally, totally different way, much more intentionally, in a much more focused way. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when you make that leap from corporate to entrepreneur, you've got some serious skills. You've developed some serious chops over your decades in the corporate world. Mostly it's decades.
Yeah.
And yet you've never launched a business before. And this whole idea of understanding where you play, what that gap is, who this ideal buyer is something that evolves over time.
Yeah.
And so another mindset issue that comes into play here is perfectionism. Some people
Oh,
just want to like
preach.
work it until I get it right, till I get it perfect. You never get it right. You never get it perfect. And it's always changing. It's always evolving because the outside world is always evolving. And I know you've done a lot in the incubator about pivoting. I've done a lot in the launch lab about pivoting. There are new problems that have emerged right now, which require new solutions, which require we start talking about them in different ways. So as you evolved, because you mentioned that too, we're
Mhm.
always evolving as entrepreneurs. We're not static. I mean, I don't offer half the things I offered 8 years ago when I first got started, right? And
It's huge.
so it's huge. It's huge. So
And
this
it's
is a
that
journey.
agility. Yeah, it is that agility. And this is so interesting. So I was having a conversation with a couple of team members, because speaking of skills from corporate, when I started, I was all by myself, and then it was like me and two people, and then it was like me and like I love to delegate. Some entrepreneurs do not love to delegate. I love to delegate. I love it. I love having support in that way. So I was discussing this with some team members about, when I build my team, I really like to look for people who have complementary skill sets. And one of the things that we talked about is, when you come from corporate, there is a level of discipline. There is a sort of professionalism of management, that is a huge gift in corporate, that they bring to the entrepreneurial world. So sometimes, to do what Deb and I are talking about, to be able to be comfortable with that level of agility, some of that tight management, you kind of have to let that go. And what I have personally found is to be able to bring people in who can offer that level of discipline, that those project management skills, the KPIs that we talked about, all of that can be huge. But I always warn them, I'm like, listen, we're not trying to be a small Bank of America. Okay. We have no interest in that. We are going to be an agile, humble, hungry, smart, continuously evolving organization. We're going to evolve like the women who are leading and running this organization. Like, we're all obsessed with this evolution. That's a major feminine, I know I'm generalizing here, but value is growth and evolution. But it takes, if we're going to evolve like that, to do it in a way that has order. We need those project management skills and those glorious like KPI skills, goal setting and accountability skills that you get in corporate, right? Like you need both of those.
You need both of those. And I got really excited yesterday because I was interviewing a potential new staff member, virtual staff member, and she shared her strength finders, her strengths.
Oh,
And
what was
I
it?
was like, well, none that I had. And I
Oh,
got super excited about that. I was like, oh my God, we're totally complementary because, I'm the activator, the achiever, the strategic creator, woo,
yes.
all of that. And, you're the steady
Yeah.
deliverer. And I was like, wow, this could be a great marriage,
Perfect. I feel like
Yeah.
we have the same strengths. Do you have ideation? I have
No,
ideation up there too. We must have one that's different.
I have strategic, relator, achiever, activator, and woo.
Okay, so I don't have relator. I have ideation, and there's one more. I didn't even know woo is one. I'm jealous of that one.
Woo, winning others over.
Oh, no. Nice. I thought you meant woo, like I have my angel cards in my drawer right
No,
now.
no, no. Woo in Clifton Strength Finders is winning others over, which is a key skill as an entrepreneur, whether you're creating partnerships, which is also really important. But, the biggest thing I think is just, get out of your own way mentally, understand the skills that you do bring to the table, hire the ones that you don't have,
Yes.
and understand what it takes to really launch a scalable business and spend time on those critical business foundations
Yeah.
that will serve you for the rest of your career, because it becomes a wash, rinse, repeat, because you're not just going to launch one thing, you're going to launch many things. And
Yeah.
my secret sauce in the corporate world that I brought with me was I was a launch professional. I
Yeah.
knew how to get into the heads of our ideal clients, to understand what motivated them, what solutions look like to them, and to package those and price them. And that has served me so well in the last 8 years
Yeah.
as I launch things. Sometimes
Right?
I launch too many things, but
Well, sometimes it's an embarrassment of riches. Let's put it that way. Listen, pruning is a very valuable activity. And I think to your point, like that's the thing about perfectionism. And if there's anything here that we can, well, there's a lot of things that we want to make sure people know. But if there's another thing that we want people to know, it's this idea that sometimes your greatness, the thing, it's like how Michelangelo created David by chipping away everything that wasn't David, starting with this block of marble. And so what we want is to help you choose the right block of marble, give you the right tools so that you can chip away everything that is not your business, and everything that is not, to channel Glennon Doyle here, the truest, most beautiful expression of your business, right? That's what we want for you. And I think these sort of fundamentals that we're talking about are so, so important, and it's interesting. I was reading an article the other day, and it was an article, a guy, I can't remember his name. I think he was the president of BBDO, which is of course a huge ad agency. And he was talking about a conversation that he had with Sheryl Sandberg. So this is all third party reporting here, people. But in this article, what he was talking about was how they agreed that your messaging, which is basically what we're talking about here, guys, it's about, do you know your client? Are you tapping into the problem that they have, into the gap? Are you articulating your position in there, the benefits, all of this good stuff is 80% of the business, right? And for those of you who are selling intangibles, it's like 90% of the business, right? Getting that right. So if you are not there yet, it's okay, because it is something that evolves, but you do want to be focused on it and set time aside. For me, I know it's really important for me to continuously have time where I can be quiet and I can continuously reevaluate. It's like your brand,
right.
you create a brand like it's a living thing. You're constantly looking at it and making sure that it is, again, one of these tools that helps you put a powerful constraint, a useful constraint, a productive constraint around the business. Otherwise, you can be anything.
Right. You're all over the place. And
Right.
anyone who launches a business, I say, well, tell me about your client. And they start with anyone who.
Yeah.
I was like, no, stop,
No.
stop.
We're like,
Well,
we're
I don't
not
want to leave.
anybody.
I don't want to leave anyone on the table. So anyone who has this problem, and that's a problem, because when you speak to everyone, you're speaking to no one. I know it's an old adage, but it's so true.
Right.
and that your messaging really needs to resonate, because if you can't attract them into your circle, if they're not paying attention to you, if they're not hearing you about the noise, then how are they ever going to do business with you?
Yeah.
So you really have to be very specific with who you're talking to and how you're speaking out there in media and all your channels.
Well, and it's so interesting because I think, to that point, that level of specificity around who we're talking to, it comes down. And again, I return to this concept of constraint. And I think intellectually, you're like everybody says that they know, that if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. So we know that intellectually, but there's this override that happens continuously. And I see the override coming from two different places. And I'd love to check in with you on this. So
Hmm.
the first is the desire for significance. And the second is the fear of loss, So if I speak to this specific group of people, I'm going to lose out on all of these other potential clients, which is sort of that flawed thinking. But I think it's also like the inner cave woman who's like, no, I'm not going to just take one apple. I need all the apples so my family doesn't starve and die. But there's this other aspect, which I think is a little bit more insidious, and I see more, which is I can't just do one thing. It can't just be easy. You know what I mean?
That's so interesting.
It has to be, I am here to do enormous things. I am here to have a massive impact. I can't, I have to serve all the people. There's this massive opportunity, but the ability to just allow yourself just to not have to serve everyone, just to take this piece, and how that actually helps you serve a much larger group. But I find those two things, the significance piece and the fear, the fear of loss piece, are two core things that can get in the way, which is why you all need people like me and Deb.
That's right.
Right? To kind of call it out and be like, you know what, you're going to be okay. And the niches are in the riches, and focus is the highest gift you can give to yourself.
Absolutely. And it's such a joy when that like light bulb goes off in the launch lab. It's like halfway through in module 3. I always say,
Yeah.
you're going to feel like you're going through the belly of the beast, but it's like this roller coaster. And once you get to the top, you can speed your way down. And getting to the top is getting that clarity of who am I here to serve, and how narrow and specific can I get that, and how well can I communicate with people who fit that profile.
Right.
And invite them into my circle. And it's so exciting, when that success happens and you witness that. It's like, oh my God, I launched my program. I got my first group of clients. I know. And then that breeds confidence and breeds more success. Yeah.
Totally. And then once you've done that, having the courage to commit, right? Like having the courage to commit once you're clear, the ability to stay there, and to stick with it, and to build your reputation around that and to allow that. Right. So yeah, so much good stuff to talk about. Okay. So let's tell people where they can get more of the brilliance that is Deb Boulanger. So of course, there's your brilliant podcast, Life After Corporate, which is amazing. There's also a Facebook group that's associated with the Life After Corporate podcast, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I love the podcast. Such good stuff.
Such good stuff. Podcasting is just amazing. And you've got a webinar coming up.
I do. And it is for women who have either just made the leap or they're thinking about the leap. It's called 5 Steps to 6 Figures and Replacing the Paycheck You Left Behind. And that's at thegreatdoover.com, which is great, DOOVER.com /6 figures. And that'll take you right to the registration page. And we're getting together next Tuesday to have that conversation.
Fun. So thegreatdoover.com /6 figures. All right. So get yourself over there. If you are in corporate, really thinking about the leap, making the leap, or you've just left corporate and that you want to have some really good guidance as you're making this transition to create a really powerful business that makes money and impact. Deb, it is such a pleasure to connect with you. I just adore you. I think you're an amazing teacher, a really brilliant marketer, and just a wonderful, wonderful human. Thank you so much for.
Oh, thank you, Eleanor. It's such a pleasure to be in your circle. I'm having such a good time.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Take care. What we would love is if you would go ahead and post in the comments one of your biggest takeaways from today's conversation. Definitely want to go check out Deb, her podcast, her Facebook group, her webinar. We're so excited to be working and supporting the work of incredible entrepreneurs like Deb. And I'm going to let you know that today's interview is sponsored by clarifyyourniche.com. So that's a masterclass we will be running. You can go on over to clarifyyourniche.com, which is sponsoring today's conversation. Thank you so much, Deb. Have an amazing day, everybody. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone.